Chapter 39. Gulping for breath, I halted and spun about, only to find that another man had come up behind me. I flung myself against a wall, even as I struggled to get Bear's dagger out of my pocket. With the two men keeping to either side of me, I was unable to confront them both. But one I saw had a large stick in his hand, the other held a knife. Keep away! I screamed, finally managing to pull Bear's dagger free from its sheath. Though my heart was pounding and my legs were shaking, I held it before me as Bear had taught me. The dagger caused my attackers to hesitate. In that moment, I made a clumsy lunge at the man with the stick. Not only did he nimbly leap out of the way, he brought his stick down hard on my wrist. The pain and shock were so great, I dropped the dagger. The next moment, arms locked around me from behind. I kicked and butted my head back. There was a sharp grunt, and the man's arms went slack, just enough to allow me to break his grasp. Head down, I charged straight at the man with the stick, catching him in the chest. He fell back. It was enough. With a burst, I ran past him down the alley. Then I plunged along a different narrow way, taking one turn after another, not daring even to glance back to see if I were being followed. I don't know how long I ran before I stopped and looked behind. Seeing no one, I allowed myself a moment's rest. Heart thudding to the point of pain, my wrist still smarting where it had been struck, I tried to grasp what had happened. Why Stromford Stewart was in Great Wexley was something I could make no sense of, but what was clear was that far from escaping the pursuers who wished me dead, I'd come to a place where they could trap me. In my frantic state, I was quite sure that not even Bear could protect me. What's more, I had disobeyed him. It was not a thing I was sure he would forgive. And hadn't he told me to run away if attacked? I made up my mind to leave the town. I would get beyond the walls and flee. Exactly where I'd go didn't matter, as long as I escaped. While it was easy to make the decision, I quickly realized I had no idea where I was or where to go in order to leave. With my distress growing every moment, I looked around, trying to get some sense of my whereabouts. When I had first arrived at Great Wexley, I had been overwhelmed by the multitude of different things I saw. Now, in a complete turnabout, my panic made everything seem the same. What's more, I couldn't help but feel that lurking behind each corner, each bend of each alley, would be more of my enemies. Still, I also knew I couldn't remain where I was. My pursuers had already proved they knew the town well enough to track me down. Moving with great caution, I wandered down one alley after another, spying ahead even as I constantly checked behind. What made things worse was that no matter where I went, I had the sensation I'd been there before. It was as if I could make no progress. But then I came to what seemed a good idea. Bear had told me that the great walls encircled this entire town. If that was the case, and I didn't doubt him, I supposed that I could find some part of them as long as I walked a straight line in any one direction. Then, once I found the walls, I'd follow around until I came to the gate through which we had entered. From there, I'd make my exit from the town and flee to safety. Feeling somewhat less apprehensive now that I had a plan, I immediately set off. Though I hurried, I remained alert lest I blunder into another attack. Again and again I made myself slow down. Try as I did to follow a straight line, I soon discovered it was impossible. The alleys and streets meandered in ways that bewildered me. It was as if I were in a maze. Even so, I forced myself to go on because I was afraid to stay in any one place. So I made my way by hugging walls, slipping around corners, all but crawling. Daylight was fading. The long summer twilight had begun to ebb. With it came a resumption of a chilly rain. Soon misty dimness cloaked the air. The brightest light came from within houses, or the occasional passer-by who made his way holding a flaming rush or lantern before him. Fewer and fewer people were abroad, shadows lengthened. Now and again men would stagger by, clearly having had too much to drink. The only other noise, and it came from shuttered houses, was an occasional burst of laughter, an angry shout, a child called out. At last I made out the town walls. They rose high over my head and seemed to melt into the murky sky. Nor were they smooth walls as I had imagined, but had houses built close against them. Even so, as far as I was concerned, I was making progress. Now, according to my plan, I needed only to follow the wall around. If I did, surely I would come upon the gate through which Bear and I had entered the town. Once again, my plan was faulty. The wall had not been built in a simple circle, but was in fact serpentine. Still, I continued on until I stumbled on a wide street paved with stone. When I recognized it as the one on which Bear and I entered the town, I started to run along it. Then two things happened almost simultaneously. The town's church bells began to ring, and I saw what appeared to be a gate in the wall. Some 9 or 10 soldiers were milling about it. A few carried flares. Though I wasn't sure if it was the same gate by which Bear and I had entered, I told myself it didn't matter. It was a way out of town. I ran toward it. Even as I did, the great doors, hauled by soldiers, swung in and shut. Not believing what I was seeing, I stopped, aghast, and watched as the soldiers dropped huge beams across the doors to brace them shut. Then they added chains and even locks to keep the doors securely closed. Having shut the gates, most of the soldiers began to stroll away, leaving only two behind. I drew close enough for them to notice me. "Did you want to leave?" one of them called. "Yes, sir," I said. "Too late. They're closed. They'll be open in the morning at prime. Now get yourself away. The curfew has begun. You should be behind doors." I remained standing where I was, unsure what to do. "Be off with you!" a soldier shouted. I turned and began to wander away. It had become night. The rain intensified. The streets, now swamps of muck and mud, were all but deserted, save a few laggards. Even they moved hurriedly, no doubt wanting to get behind doors lest they be taken up and charged. Animals began to emerge, mostly pigs and dogs, but rats too. They were splashing about in search of things to eat. As night thickened, people put up their house shutters. The town grew even darker than before. Hearing the sound of marching, I turned quickly. Some 6 helmeted soldiers, armed with broadswords and bearing lanterns, were coming down the street. I leaped into a narrow alley and peered out. As they went by, one of the soldiers shouted out, "The hour of compline is at hand. The curfew is in force. No one may be on the streets." As they passed, I shrank back, listening as the tramp and shouts grew fainter. It was night now. The town seemed asleep. The sky was black. The rain still fell. I wandered on, wet and miserable, looking for a place to conceal myself, hoping I might stumble upon the green man. The only sound I heard was the squish of my feet on the mud or stones. I hardly dared to breathe. Then I heard the sound of running feet. I pressed myself against the wall and peeked out around the corner. A group of men, torches held aloft, hurried past. By the light of their torches, I glimpsed their blue and gold livery. It was the same livery as Lady Furnival's entourage wore, but I recognized them as the steward's men. How could that be? Then I recalled something that I had heard the strangers say in the forest. Aycliffe was Lady Furnival's kin. I wanted to think things through, but feared to take the time. Instead, I backed away and scurried down the narrowest of alleys, the wall so close I could have touched either side by stretching out both arms. I was halfway down it when I saw the hulking form of someone lurching toward me, hooded lantern in hand. I stopped, turned, and began to run in the opposite direction, only to hear a thunderous, "Crispin, stop!" Chapter 40. Hearing my name called so terrified me. I stopped and turned around. The man had drawn closer, but as I could not see his face, I shrank away. Only when the voice called out again, even angrier, "Crispin, you stunted son of a scoundrel!" did I realize it was Bear. Heart exploding with relief, I ran toward him and flung myself at his knees, embracing him with fervor. "Where by the sands of Lucifer have you been?" the huge man said, setting his lantern on the ground, prying me loose, then putting his great hands both on my shoulders. He made me stand before him. At the same time he went to his knees so I could look into his eyes. "Bear," I said, unable to say more because I had put my arms about him and pressed into his neck and beard like an infant sparrow returned to its nest. "Crispin," he scolded, "I waited all afternoon for you to return. Did you forget me so soon? Is this your way you repay my kindness? I should give you a sound whipping." "I didn't mean to. I lost my way, and I was attacked." "Attacked?" he said, prying me loose from his neck so he could look into my face. "By whom?" "The steward's men." "What steward?" "From Stromford. John Aycliffe. He's come after me," I went on in a rush. "I saw him in the great church, but he saw me too. The moment he did, he set men upon me. And Bear, I remembered something else. He's Lady Furnival's kin. I even saw her. You said Great Wexley was Furnival's principal home, that Stromford was one of his holdings. Now that Lord Furnival is dead, Lady Furnival must have summoned Aycliffe." "Oh, I feared that might happen." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to avoid it all. My wrist is numb where they struck me." "Then you'll have to walk on your feet," he said, grinning. With that, he turned about and began to wend his way through the back streets and dark alleys, his lantern barely showing the way through the dark and rain. "When I tried to defend myself," I said after we had gone for a while, "I lost your dagger." "I'm sure you used it well." "Bear," I said as we went along. "What?" God bless you.
And you also, he returned gruffly.
Only when I was secure behind the doors of Widow Daventry's inn did I draw a fully relaxed breath. I looked about. The main room was deserted.
Bear, you need to tell me what I should do if.
The widow came into the room. As she did, Bear put up his hand to silence me.
Ah, the woman said. You found him. He was wandering and became lost, Bear said, not mentioning the attack. Did the watch see you? She asked me.
I don't think so.
Good. She drew herself up. I'm afraid John Ball has just arrived. Where is he? Bear said. In the kitchen. He demanded to be fed. Fine. I'll get the boy to the room. Can you fetch him something to eat and some dry clothes? I'll get some, the woman said, and left the room.
Giving me no explanation as what his exchange with Widow Daventry had been about, Bear and I returned to our room. Once there, he set the lantern on the table, then bade me lie down on the pallet. When I did, Bear sat down by my side, but instead of speaking, became lost in his thoughts. Even so, I felt comforted. Widow Daventry opened the door and stuck her head inside.
He's getting anxious, she said. He always was an impatient man, Bear muttered. I'm coming.
The woman left. Bear stood and stepped toward the door.
Now eat your bread and go to sleep.
Will you truly forgive me? I said.
There's nothing to forgive. Sometimes I forget.
Forget what?
How little you know.
With no further words, he went away. Left alone, I hardly knew what to think, but after what had just happened to me and how he had come after me, I had no heart to question him.